Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. We are proudly presented by SPI Logistics, and I am your host, Blythe Brumleve. I'm happy to welcome in Jonathan Briggs. He's the VP of Sales and Solutions at Nimble, which is an autonomous logistics and AI robotics company. I love talking about all of these things. So, Jonathan, welcome into the show.
I appreciate you having me, Blythe. It's exciting to be here. It's my pleasure and honor to be here.
Oh, well, appreciate it. Well, before we get into, sort of, you guys have a lot of awesome things, interesting things going on at Nimble, but take me back to before you joined the team over at Nimble. What was your career background? Because you have a pretty lengthy career in the logistics industry.
I appreciate you calling me old without saying old. So thank you for that. Interestingly enough, I got into what I would call industry of logistics or transportation as a summer job. I started in my senior year, summer before my senior year of high school, loading and unloading trucks, washing trucks at UPS. And then that turned into 7 years with those guys before I knew it. And so operations and sales on the UPS side was what kicked off this career. And then across most of the small parcel carriers with FedEx and DHL, two different divisions of DHL. And then at the tail end of my time at DHL, I got into e-commerce and regionalized fulfillment and made it over to a little company that a lot of people have heard lately called Quiet Logistics, which was purchased by American Eagle, and then got into the robotics industry because I saw all these headwinds and challenges with labor across the pandemic, before pandemic, post pandemic. Just felt like it wasn't getting better, and for whatever reason, I fell on a bunch of radar screens of folks in startups and robotics, and here I am now, kind of rolling up my whole life's work at Nimble in using my transportation because I run strategy for transportation for the business, oversee our sales of which ultimately the core product today is fulfillment, and then we're highly autonomous in robotics. So all those things I learned before coming here are put to good use every single day.
So it's interesting. You went from, sort of the big corporate conglomerates to the startup world. How do you think that experience in the corporate world helped shape your role at a startup?
Yeah, I think my time at DHL, if you think about how big DHL is in America, when I started in 2005, they just bought in Airborne Express, and they were a challenger brand. They were a far distant third of three carriers in the U.S. And so, even though they were huge, we fought like a strategy, went to market like we were a startup. And so I think that started it then. And even within DHL e-commerce, as I got to, they were very startup like and entrepreneurial. And so, yes, had some benefits of big logos tied to those, but still, I think those things got me on the pathway. And then now I think it'd be hard to go back to a big business. Just, having been in this world a couple of years now, and the scrappiness and how things can change and how flat the organizations are. It really is exciting when you can have a thought in the morning and it could be executed in the afternoon, like on some of these things. So it is pretty exciting
Oh, wow.
from that regard.
That's super interesting too, because you don't have, I guess, the handcuffs of getting approval after approval, which is, not saying that DHL does that, but some of these other bigger companies where you got to go through a lot of red tape in order to get an idea to come to fruition.
Oh yeah, far less signatures. But I roll into the CEO, so I'm not
Oh,
a whole lot
perfect.
of distance I need to travel to get things done. So yeah, and really we want to act that way. Even when we get big, we still want to be in this mindset to be scrappy and live up to our name, as we like to say, and be nimble. And so yeah, absolutely. I don't know that this is something we'll get away with even as we add levels and layers. We really like how quickly we can make things happen and get ahead of things as things are changing by the second, right? Especially with all of this AI and all these things, like we've got to move quick. And usually by the time you've deployed something, it's already too late. And so you can't just sit around and hang your hat on yesterday's success.
And I think that brings up, the first series of questions. I have a ton of questions that I wanted to ask about this entire process because when folks refer to AI right now, they're typically referring to, ChatGPT, these large language models, but Nimble is an autonomous logistics and AI robotics company. So I guess with respect to AI, how does all of that sort of fit together in its own little ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, those are all the things you said are truly artificial intelligence. We're just doing very different things with it, right? We're picking orders with it. We're packing boxes with it. We're making decisions, as we've gone into our 2.0 of our software, it truly is artificial intelligence, machine learning, reinforced learning the machine is now making decisions throughout the day of which order to pick, when to pick it, which robot to use to pick it. Early on, we were kind of hard wiring those decisions and almost walking alongside the robot, if you will, to make it happen. But now we've pushed enough data, we've done enough activities that we've been able to turn it over. And so things like picking paths and dimensions of which box to use at the packout station are all happening through artificial intelligence now within our framework, which is very different than all the things we see on LinkedIn of it can now do my homework for me, and it can send more spam emails as a salesperson and not look like it came from a robot, like those things. But we're making it do activities that traditionally would have been blue collar work in a warehouse, and get rid of that monotonous, repetitive motion, high turnover, high danger activities by picking and packing through the hardware, which is then powered by the software, which is ultimately driven through artificial intelligence.
And I thought I was looking through the Nimble website, and there was a Medium blog that was linked on there, and it says, there's a lot of hype playing into the robot takeover narrative. The purpose of this blog post is to present some exciting breakthroughs in robotics research while debunking fact from fiction. It said robots had been around and widely used in manufacturing since the 1960s. While we've been calling them robots for all this time, a more fitting name would be reprogrammable motion machines. They are explicitly programmed to repeat trajectories exactly the same way every time. They lack the intelligence to self-adapt if their environment or tasks change even the slightest. And now fast forward to today, almost nothing has changed. And what I found interesting is that post was written in 2019. So we are still having a lot of those same conversations today with respects to AI, with respects to robotics. What does AI look like, I guess, in the warehouse operations? You kind of explained a little bit of like picking and packing, but what does it look like, I guess, from a large scale perspective?
Well, it looks different, because there's lots of different platforms within there. It could be controlling material handling equipment. It could be actually a pick and place robot that is picking an item from say a tote and putting it in another tote, or putting it in a box or a mailer or an envelope. In the case of say a pack out, it could just be getting an item off the shelf and onto another cart or another conveyor belt. It could be inducting units into say a unit sorter. So all think about places where you have a lot of monotonous, repetitive motion lifting activities, right? So I have to take a box from a pallet and put it on a conveyor belt, back and forth, and that is a high laborsome, high turnover position. We now can do that through artificial intelligence and the vision systems. As an example, we can place, if you've ever seen a unit sorter or even a parcel sorter, somebody's there pushing one item at a time. Again, we just go back and forth and automate that. And so what's happened with artificial intelligence is really taking human-like skill sets and applying them to machines. So vision system. So we're teaching them to see the world. Think about lately, anytime you go into a Google or anything, and it's asking, "Are you a robot or not?" and it says, "Pick if this is a crosswalk or a whatever." That's us being used for machine learning for self-driving vehicles, as an example. Well, that's the same vision systems we use within our systems to be able to see products and say, all right, this is a mouse pad, or this is a cup, or this is a T-shirt, or whatever. That starts with the vision system, and then we have taught it over time to say, okay, when I have to pick up a pen, I need to use so much force, just like your eye sees that and tells your brain, I need to squeeze with 2 fingers, or I need to use all 5 fingers, and I need it's not, you don't tell yourself, I need 1 pound of force, I need 10 pounds of force. But that's ultimately what you've trained yourself. When you lift something light versus heavy, you lift it differently versus, like, let's say something's on the ground and you're working out, as an example, and you're picking a kettlebell off the ground. You squat down, you get in athletic positions, you're using your whole body to lift that. Well, the same would hold true if I'm using a robot. I might pick something that's 45 pounds up very differently if I pick something that's 8 ounces up. And so this combination of what you might hear it as neural networks or artificial intelligence, AI brains, all of this stuff that we have built into our human brains is built and programmed through repetitive things and tasks. And over time, it starts to learn from itself and teach itself. And so we will continue to see the ability to be more adaptive on the fly, less shutdowns, less does not compute. I don't know what this new item is, which is partly why we're very slow to pull the trigger on autonomous vehicles, right? Like we're worried about all the changing, the environment changing in real time with weather and sunlight and darkness and kids jumping out in front of cars. Well, the same holds true in a warehouse, right? And if we pick something for the first time it might shut the system down, and in the second time it says, "Okay, I got this," and then but we may have had to interrupt that and say, okay, we had to write code and tell it you need to do A, B, C, and D in order to make this happen.
Hmm.
This over time now, that vision system, that neural network will actually make those decisions and teach itself to say, okay, I'm going to pick this up the same way I did the pen because this is a pencil, and pens and pencils are pretty much the same thing when it comes to picking it up. So getting smarter, their continuous improvement, and the more we can start building the warehouse around the systems
Hmm.
instead of the opposite is what we've been doing to date, systems around pre-existing environments that were built for people to interact in. So it's around safety, ergonomics, having a person come in and out of the workplace and not endanger that person. Is we can start from scratch and build it up from the ground up, gets us that much closer to what everybody's kind of talked about, this kind of lights out warehouse. And so that's where we've been doing, and what we've done with our fulfillment network is we built greenfield environments, built it around the system first, and then we'll add people into it as we need to. And ultimately, we want to get end to end. And I think that's not just true for us. I think that's true for this space. Continuing to get it to where it runs with more uptime and more precision and can adapt on the fly as environments are always changing and products are always changing. We need something that can continue to do it. And that's been the delay, I think, to date, is that combination of the safety factors and also the stop start of oops, new product, where do we go from? But the more we can get that human intervention out of it, the more we can really turn it over and start really seeing this go to next level.
Now, are Nimble Robotics, is most of your robotics, are they pick and pack, or is it a variety, or maybe the pick and pack is like 80% of the robotics that you guys have? What's the ratio there?
Yeah, so right now we've done this in stages. So we've automated 100% of the pick side of the
Hmm.
business. So we have gotten rid of what would be a picker in our warehouse, which is about 65% of the warehouse labor in a traditional
Hmm.
environment that's got racking and aisles and stuff like that. So that's first and foremost. Now we're heavy in testing and R&D work to go to the next lowest hanging fruit of people, and that's pack out. And so as we round out this year and roll into Q1, we think we'll have that solved for. And that leaves us then at that point with dock work. We need to unload trailers and we need to load trailers with people. We need to do a little bit of sorting. And we've got a long line of R&D activities happening to do that, to where we'll load and unload trucks. We will do robotic sorting of packages for our parcel carriers. We will do automated inductions into our storage systems. And so little by little, we will become fully autonomous. We just are starting, from the pathway of where's the most labor to the least amount of labor, and kind of working ourselves backwards in that process.
That's interesting because some of the drivers that I talk to, one of their biggest complaints is how long they have to wait at the receiver, at warehouses. And so I would imagine that, having robotics somehow integrated into that system will help drivers in the end, even though, there's a whole other show that we could do on, drivers in autonomous trucks and, that, sort of debate around that. But one of the other big complaints is that, when I'm pulling up to a receiver, pulling up into a warehouse, I am waiting for hours, and that cuts into their pay and cuts into, frustration. So it's interesting that there are, solutions being worked on to try to help, alleviate that part of the job. Now, when it comes to, I guess, the products that can be picked and packed, are there good products? Are there bad products? Are there, products that are a good fit, but other ones, still require, that human element, like you mentioned earlier, like a dumbbell or something like that. Are these robots that strong to be able to grasp products like that? Or is it mostly, like makeup goods, beauty, healthcare, things like that?
Well, I mean, theoretically, you can design a robot to do anything. We've
Hmm.
put our focus around the small, lightweight items. So what we've built and developed is handling apparel, footwear, cosmetics, health and beauty, food supplements, those types of things. But the weight capacity is like, I don't know. I think we can pick over 150 pounds now,
Oh, wow.
if needed to. But we're still, because of there's a lot of complexity in those types that we just talked about in terms of like SKU bases, picking, lots of units per order. So we create a lot of value for ourselves with somebody, just when we compete with folks that are pushing carts up and down an aisle, or using a material handling product that meets them and they place an item on there, because there's long pick paths and lots of units per order, 3, 4, 5 plus.
Hmm.
And the more units you add to the order, the harder it is to pick that, very, very cost effectively. So we've focused on those areas for, the complexity side of it. Also, they tend to be higher margin products. So there's a whole bunch of things that come into play, but there's definitely robotics companies out there that are picking much heavier things or are working in palletized products and crated products, versus we've focused heavily at the unit level, just because that's where most of the inefficiencies lie
Hmm.
in terms of, with that, as we've added more e-commerce as a percent of revenue or percent of sales versus say retail, we continue to add exponentially more inefficiencies to supply chains. Because if you think about a big box warehouse, or pallet in, pallet out, truck in, truck out, they might need 20 people on a shift. If you had that same type of square footage and same type of volume, if it was unit level activity, you probably need 200 to 400 people on a shift in
Oh,
that
wow.
same building. So, and the same thing holds true on the delivery side of it, right? If once we're taking a 53 footer with 26 pallet positions on it and taking that from point A to point B, now we're taking a parcel truck with one item in it weighing less than a pound going to the cul-de-sac, making one delivery. We now need more trucks, we need more drivers, and the drivers tend to be the same labor pool that we also get our pickers and our packers and stuff like that. So e-commerce has created a lot of inefficiencies there, and so that's why we've been so focused on unit level type stuff, and small lightweight stuff is just because they require so much more labor,
Hmm.
and are so much more intensive. And we think we can set ourselves apart as that. But back to your original question, there's anything and everything can be lifted as long as you have the right machine and the right horsepower behind it.
Yeah, it's almost like a business decision. Like, what kind of market do you want to go after as a robotics company? The ones that you can, that the real value is there, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
versus the latter. Now, what does I guess what does the sales process look like for finding somebody? Like, is there ever a case where somebody's like, I would like one robot? Does that ever happen, or is it no? You got to do the full scale thing.
So almost always, people want to crawl, walk, run. This is a very different thing, and,
Hmm.
and I guess also just take a step. Currently, we're selling our warehouse and the ability, and we want people to put their products in our warehouse. So we're really now competing as a third party logistics or
Okay,
3PL
that
provider.
makes sense.
But we started out selling robots. My past life, I was selling robots, and everybody wants to start with just one because we're not sure how it's going to go, and we don't know if everybody, and a lot of people, especially in big enterprise level businesses, they're not sure how to purchase it.
Hmm.
It's very different than if they bought a conveyor belt or a pallet jack or whatever the case may be. Is in their minds they buy this machine and they buy it one time and they sweat this asset out over 20 years. And even though the manufacturer said 10 years, they all say, hey, we're better, we're going to double the life, so on. So, but with the robotics and artificial intelligence, it's a combination of hardware and this AI platform. And so you upfront have a capital investment of the machine, but then you have to continue to license the know-how and the capability of how do I pick and pack and
Hmm.
do all this stuff, because there's a lot of support and resources and R&D and maintenance and programming that goes into that. And that's where like it's been challenging for a lot of the robotics companies to sell into the big, Fortune 100s, if you will, for that mindset of they just want to buy this machine one time and
Hmm.
not have to keep sending money every year for the same thing that they should have only bought once in their mind. Not now, there's a million and one reasons why you want to keep having the know-how and somebody to keep investing in the know-how to make it better. But a lot, when you're spending millions upon millions of dollars, that people get a little bit gun shy on that. So yes, it's a very common thing. If you were just selling a robot, that somebody would say, can we start with sending you products and you test it, and then you can then put one in ours, and then we might go to two, and that could go from years. A lot of like proof of concepts, piloting, and stuff like that. That's why we're excited about what we're doing is we get to show at scale a pilot. People can test drive it, drop some units in our things, and over time, I will be putting systems back in other people's warehouses again. We just need to get through this stage of where we're at. And so it's a great opportunity for somebody that's unsure and they're not sure, because if they were to buy our system, as an example, again, we haven't set pricing, but just as an example of what I see of peers in the industry, this is like a $30 to $50 million upfront capital investment.
Hmm.
And I think we've all been around the industry enough to hear brands and companies say, I invested in something and it didn't work the way we thought it would. And now we got to rip it all out again. Well, if that doesn't go your way and you just drop $50 million into a robotic system, somebody's going to lose some jobs in a hurry, right? And so we like, with our strategies, you can do a try before you buy. You can just say, hey, would you want this type of system in your warehouse? Put some of your goods in our warehouse and we'll pick, pack, and ship it, and you can see it firsthand. It may not be what you want it to be, and that's okay, but you didn't spend $50 million to find out the hard way. That does, because ours isn't small. You don't just put one robot in, you put a big system in, and as a result of that, it would be very challenging for somebody just to like test drive it. So with us having this 3PL network, it does create that opportunity as we get back into system sales, that they could do a huge try before they buy and study it out and test drive it and proof of concept it, with really no more risk than their line haul of goods into our warehouse to put their products. They're not out anything else, because they have to pick and they have to pack and they have to ship those goods anyway. And we probably optimized it and we probably did it for a better rate, and we zone skipped half the country. Instead of them being, say, on the East Coast, we may have put it in our West Coast. And so we give them a lot of gains while they're test driving those things out.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and very, I would imagine, more low risk than some of these initial, like you said, high capital investments, where if you're going to make that kind of investment, like everybody has to be on board. Whereas this could be something where, maybe one executive or one department within a company can do a test drive and then be able to figure out, okay, what does that, I guess, and maybe that's my next question. What does that next step? So they've test drove it, everything looks good. What does that next step look like? Do they just start sending all of their products to your different fulfillment centers, or do they start an integration process with a brand new warehouse? Is it possible to integrate into a current warehouse? What does that next step look like for them?
Yeah, it varies. And we find a lot of people that wanted to do it themselves after putting their product in our warehouses don't want to do it themselves
Mhm.
anymore, and realize that, hey, this is really nice. Like, we don't have all this capital. We transactionally buy. We're on an OpEx environment instead of this CapEx environment. So we get rid of fixed labor, we get rid of fixed cost, and we can amortize these things a lot easier. So, but yes, we do see multiple paths. Some of it's a hybrid, our warehouses and their warehouses. Some of it's they shut off their warehouses and go to more warehouses. Long term, I think it'll be systems of ours back in their warehouses, but then we also will have some nodes that will operate for them. Just depends on the size of the customer as to whether they're going to go all in with one provider, or they still want to be their own operator for parts of their things. We talk heavily about hub and spoke networks, and trying to localize and regionalize products to get to end customers. Really hard to put an entire SKU base in multiple locations and be right about it. So we oftentimes will talk about, like, hey, put your slow mover, especially if you think about apparel. Like, that's why the other reason why I love them, because they have hundreds of thousands of SKUs. So let's say they typical apparel brand, 100,000 SKUs, 30% are making up 60% of the sales. Well, why am I putting that other 70% all over the country? I'll operate it, or them. I'm talking like them, as the brand. I'll keep my Columbus, Ohio warehouse, and I'll be the hub, and I'll forward deploy into a Nimble as a spoke, and
Hmm.
I'll put those fast moving 30% in around the country, so I can localize without overspending in my inventory, and avoiding double shipments and things of that nature. So there's a whole bunch of reasons and strategies why we think hybrid is the right way to help customers. And one of the things that for us in our current state, I find that the biggest challenge is the uncertainty of how many brands have still only been in one single site as a fulfillment company. To get to site two is a huge lift, and it is a fundamental shift. It is a system shift. It keeps people up at night, like at high levels, about inventory placement and where to put the right inventory. And so we do a lot of data mining and visualizing of data to get people. And that's why we say, let's start with just a real small pilot, and just give us a subset of SKUs, and let's start small and help you solve a problem that you need to solve. Whether it be from sustainability of cost or sustainability of the environment, or all these other things. Customers are asking for things to be delivered faster and more reliably than. Again, there was a minute where it paused, but again, they want fast and they want reliable, and there's still nobody is raising their hand to pay for shipping. And so you've got to figure out ways with all the inflationary things to get product closer to the end customer so you can ship it more cost effectively. And we kind of help with that crawl, walk, run strategy we put together.
Now, with the crawl, walk, run strategy, is this something that some of the smaller, medium sized e-commerce brands can take advantage of, or is it really more? It just makes more sense for more of the enterprise level, the big box retailers, big brands, cosmetic brands, things like that.
I think anybody can, to a certain point. There's probably somebody that needs to just flip the switch because they're only doing a couple hundred orders a day, and it might be counterproductive.
Hmm.
But if you were, let's say you wanted to have two locations and you're in one today, then you have that, whether it's your own site or your 3PL, and you wanted to get to two, well, why not do that with us and test drive it? And you can, we don't disrupt what you're already doing. If you already love your current setup, and we're just helping you just optimize a little bit of your SKU base and helping out a percent of your customer base in another market. And so, yeah, so we do see people, and I think that's also the fact of where we're at, right? We're a, 6, 7 year old company that has been in stealth most of its life up until March of this year. So we don't have the brand recognition of the brands I used to work for. And so it is very much, we used to talk about when I was, this is almost way, way, way back when I was at DHL 15 plus years ago, we talked about people could get fired for making a DHL decision. And I think that's true of any challenger brand, regardless of where, like, if you're not a known, you create a perceived risk. That doesn't say that the risk is true, but because the CEO doesn't know about it, or the other internal stakeholders or the shareholders or the board members don't know who Nimble is, there's this like inherent perceived risk that they do. And so we're trying to de-risk it. So I think we see more people that we've partnered with to date do very much a lot of crawling before they get walking for that very reason. Now, the good news is we are getting them into that next phase and second phase and so on. We are proving ourselves and doing really well, but they start very tentatively because, we don't have a lot of customers to date. We don't have, tens and tens of years of running fulfillment centers through peak season. My operators do, I do, my leadership team does, but Nimble itself doesn't. And so, so I think those are all valid reasons why we see it. And as we progress, as we get more customers, we have more testimonials, I think we'll get into more normalized buying cycles, and people will be willing to do more of an all or nothing versus just a little test drive.
And when you talk about these test drives, what does I guess what does the timeline of a test drive look like? Is it a couple years? Is it a few months? Break that down for us.
Yeah, and it varies by brand to brand. We
Mm,
we would
true.
not have it go longer than a year, and more often than not, we're seeing it live kind of in the 2 to 3 months range is what we see play out with our customers. And then we can do different things. We can either build that ramp in the beginning, which is mostly what most people are doing. Is they're like, hey, if we invest this time, we like what we're doing. I don't want to get back to the table again and redo all of our contracts and do. Let's plan for the future
Yep.
and say, hey, we'll do this as long as you do what you're supposed to do. And if not, we'll have some type of breakup time and we'll part ways or whatever. So more often than not, we're building kind of this phased approach and contractually accounting for this approach. And as long as we're doing what we said we're going to do, and they're still on board with it, we'll continue to press on to those next stages, and we don't have to start from scratch every time we go to expand together.
And one aspect of it, because as a just dealing with a lot of folks who are really scared about ChatGPT, AI, that sort of the fear mongering side of the media. There's also some aspects of on the onboarding process where I've heard other robotics companies where they will talk about how they involve a psychological component to their onboarding process, where they actually have to train the employees to look at the robotics as a helper, as they're going to help you do your job. They're not going to take your job. Do you guys have to, sort of, I guess, deploy any of that, sort of the onboarding side of things, or are most of these companies willing to take the help right now?
Well, so we're indifferent, right? We built the second or next generation fulfillment center from scratch and started with the robots already in store. What you're talking about is where somebody that's already had hundreds of associates and they're bringing in the next generation, and then there's this like, are we going to lose our people, or is everybody going to revolt? And so I've lived that in past life, where you do have to say it's okay, like this is an ergonomic thing, this is an efficiency thing, this is making your life better, but we're coming in, we already have that position, and people are already known in what they're getting into, and most of our associates are coming at a much higher level position. It's because of we've outsourced a lot of the more menial tasks to the systems and the robots. We're getting a higher level employee with a higher level skill set, and it's totally different level. But I think that's more so when you start very manual and you start automating is when you have to go through that. And then if you have unions involved, you have to do a whole lot more at the union level. To make sure that they know that those union jobs aren't going anywhere. But the data is all clear, right? Like there's nobody that has employed less people after they've gotten robots. Everybody that's employed robots has increased the amount of people. I mean,
Oh, wow.
look at the amount of robots that Amazon has, but look how many amount of people that they've hired in the last 10 years. I mean, they've gone north of 1 million people, even though they have more than that in terms of robots. They're still adding people. I know, a lot of brands have been hit with some layoffs and stuff like that, just because the growth stopped that we thought was going to live forever after the 19s 2021 time frame. But in general, like they still have exponentially more people than they had working for them in 2019, despite investing heavily into robotics. So it's just the jobs change, right? Like we're a tech company with an operations department. So I employ people that are developers and engineers and, very high level skill sets. But I have a lot less people that are as an hourly associate, and it's kind of the reverse when we think of like a 3PL who's an operations company with a tech department. We're the reverse of it. So we're still hiring lots of people. They're just not your day-to-day associate that you typically see if you went through a warehouse. But we need this higher skill set to run the warehouse. So we're just hiring differently, and more effectively. And I think people that will be more career driven than just a paycheck driven.
And when we talk about, I guess, deploying these different systems and how you have the pilot program where folks can send their products and they can test out Nimble, but then on the flip side, where you have these companies that have completely bought in and they want the Nimble robotic system inside their warehouse. You were speaking earlier about retrofitting older warehouses instead of starting from scratch. What does that process kind of look like? Is Nimble on site doing it? Is it just do you have maintenance people there? I imagine it's a whole set up a whole team that's doing this.
It's painful enough that we started to build our own warehouses, that we decided that we didn't want to build. What happens is there's no two warehouses that are alike, right?
True.
There's no systems, no tech stacks that are alike, no requirements, no designs, et cetera. And so all of a sudden now you're a custom integrator every warehouse you went to. And so it was all the things you just said. It was, we had hardware folks on site, software folks on site, people just observing and watching, a long period of time of continuing to like monitor and record and figure out what is causing it. Then there are tech resources, maintenance resources that are involved to do preventative maintenances and things of that nature. And we do certain things differently with certain brands. Like some want to do everything, and we're like fourth level contact. And there's others that don't want to do anything, and we do everything and anything. Our people are on site, and we're running and maintaining and monitoring and all that stuff. So it does vary even within our own customer base of what we do and don't do for them, brand by brand.
Yeah, I can imagine that takes an enormous amount of time, probably a year, maybe a couple of years, just depending on the location. I can just think of, when I used to do custom web development, and I'm like, why am I reinventing the wheel every single time for new clients? Let's productize it, and then that way you can sell one, go after one market. And then that way it's much more streamlined, for a variety of different reasons, which helps a ton. Now, you've spent a while. I'm not going to call you old, but you
No, no, I was
spent
just teasing. Well, you're good. You're good.
you spent you have experience in e-commerce, but you also have the experience in the level of e-commerce where you've seen these massive trends that have taken shape. Obviously we have the the .com bust. We have the mid 2000s, maybe like 2015 to 2019 where it was just, people are starting to get a little familiar with e-commerce, and then you have COVID, it, kind of explodes everything. And now, your grandparents are ordering from Instacart and everybody's comfortable with e-commerce. What are some current, I guess, maybe fads that you think are going to kind of go to the wayside with e-commerce? And then what are some trends that you think have longevity?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost is 15-minute grocery deliveries. We're already seeing that pool of money dry up in a hurry, and
Oh, don't say that.
casualties.
No.
Are you an adopter?
I'm
Are
an
you using?
Instacarter.
I think Instacart's safe. I think that's a little bit different. But I'm talking about like true, like I order my entire house of groceries, and 15 minutes later it's at my doorstep. Like that's been a big burn of
Hmm.
cash and not very profitable for folks. And I think we've also seen a lot of those types of stores, people re-entering stores again at a, or at least doing the curbside pickup
True.
and things. So I think that's one that, like, super low margin products being delivered in seconds is not a sustainable
Hmm.
business, regardless of what category that is. But I think, most biggest fad of that falls into 15, 30-minute grocery delivery. So I think that's one. I think we're going to continue to see more new channels develop, right? Different acronyms that mean a different way to get your product, right? We've had like the add-ons of like buy online, pick up in store, pick up at curb, all those things. I think where we're starting to see it is now happen on the return side of it. So I buy online, return to store, or I buy online, return to a return bar. Those types of things. I think we're going to continue to see more of that. Uh, and I think gone are the days of free returns. It feels like too many people, using their house as the changing room, and buying 5 items, sending 3 back is very expensive.
Hmm.
And so we're starting to see a lot of the brands start to put a fee up front now on returns, whether it's to cover logistics back or just to be a deterrent. It depends on who you ask what's happening there. So I think those are some things we're seeing change. Um, I think gone are the days of just being direct to consumer, and we see this play out kind of in reverse, right? Nike was firing all of their wholesalers a couple years, and now all of a sudden they're all friends again, and they're adding every footwear, DSW to Foot Locker are all friends again with them, and so they did that because they thought, hey, we're Nike and we can go direct to consumer, we can acquire our customers very differently. And now they've been sitting on a ton of excess inventory and realize there is value in wholesale partnership. And the reverse side of that is all these darlings of e-commerce that the digitally native folks that were anti-store. We will never have a store. They're putting up stores by the tens and the hundreds now, and we're seeing people that I will never be on Amazon. Be in Amazon. I think a perfect case in point is Victoria's Secret. I mean, that is a solid. Well, I shouldn't say solid. That is a brand that most everybody knows, and they decided here in the last 18 months, 2 years, whatever it's been, that they're going to now sell on Amazon, and they've expanded that relationship publicly.
Hmm.
And that's somebody, if you asked me 5 years ago, would a brand like them do that? I would say absolutely not. And no, so I think that tells me that there's, the cost of customer acquisitions for pure play e-commerce has gotten really challenging in the wake of all of the things that have happened with like the iOS 14 and above, with getting rid of cookies, getting rid of, Facebook, is very expensive now, and they were felt like free for a while. And all of a sudden people, and profitability is important for running a business. I don't know why that stopped being important, but in e-commerce, it didn't seem to matter for about 10 years. It was all about growth at any cost. And so as we start focusing on metrics that matter, we need to figure out where else we can acquire our customer, and stores and wholesale and marketplaces all seem to be kind of coming together as friends again.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I love that point about Victoria's Secrets because I would have never purchased for. I mean, they were the mall staple.
Yeah.
To put, I guess in old date on myself, they were the mall staple of when you would, that would be the must stop. Every single trip you go to the mall, but. I only recently purchased from them online, and it was I don't know why I never thought about purchasing from them online, but I think it's the foot traffic part of it where you just don't see them, so you don't think about it. And I very rarely, will watch live TV, and so that less time to see commercials. So that's interesting you brought that up, because now it puts them back in the forefront, where it makes that purchasing so much easier, because Amazon is so, for better or worse, they're so ingrained in our daily lives. So that partnership is super interesting. Now, shifting gears a little bit, going back to, not going back, but I hate kind of, talking about, the fear side of AI, but that's one, I talk a lot about AI with respect to, large language models on this show, especially over the last 6 months. And most of my family, they do not have any idea of what logistics is, what I do, what AI is, what it does. So they rightfully, or not rightfully, but they're subject to, some of the fear porn that's out there. What do you say? I would imagine that you're kind of in the same boat, where somebody kind of knows you're working a little bit in, AI and robotics, and they get a little nervous, and then they come to you and they ask you about it. What are some of those ways, I guess, you alleviate some of those fears from, folks that are outside of the logistics industry that really understand the nuances of it?
Yeah, it's great call out. I kind of get a pass a little bit in the sense that we often use robotics more often than we use AI when
Hmm.
we talk about robotics, and so everybody just thinks about the hardware and the systems and don't realize all the neural networks that I talked about, where we're taking people skills and applying them to a machine. So so I don't get into that, but I see all the things you're talking about, and I think about all these movies I saw as a kid, like Minority Report, and like
iRobot.
it's there, right? Like we're there. We're in that age now. All of a sudden, I don't think there's three people attached to a machine. These are like computers, but still, the thought process behind some of those movies are very much coming to life. In we're living the futures now, right? And so there's definitely things that are alarming and concerning, and I think it's really concerning when you see one of like the forefront folks in like the more chat side of this stand up to government and say we need oversight now. Like that's really alarming to me,
Hmm.
because most people in business do not want any government oversight or regulatory, especially on something like that can be a game changer and give you a ton of revenue streams and power and so on. So I thought that was very telling to see this year. And but in general, I think there's a ton of positives of it. Right? It's creating it's easing day to day lives in taking mundane tasks and throwing it onto to something that can automate. Really, I early on in my career, I learned this process of like time management of eat the frog, where you do the worst thing you're going to do that day first thing in the morning so that you can like plow through it. And I could think of like how many times I could have applied AI to eat the frog activities I've done in my life. So it gets some of those things that are mundane and tedious and repetitive, whether it's mentally through typing, through physical labor, and then now makes where we're spending more of our day doing the things we want to do, like talking to customers, strategizing, big picture stuff, and we outsource, so to speak, these things that are repetitive and kind of mundane, and we don't need it. So I think as long as we are using it in those lenses, awesome, all for it. It's when we want to take over the world and destroy the world and use it for evil that it does get you a little bit like you could keep people up at night in a hurry if they get fixated on those things. So but I think we're still, regardless of positive, negative, whatever, there's a long way to go before these are very stable, viable, are going to do a lot of big things beyond writing your emails for you and
Right.
things of that nature. But they will get there. They will get to where they can do big things. And there's definitely probably more jobs than people realize are going to be impacted by it, like programmers, people that write code. Eventually, those systems will write code, and so there will be, it's not just a blue collar job of labor that will be impacted by this. It's every job and any job you can think of, potentially, could be impacted negatively or positively depending on how you apply it and how you lean into it.
Yeah, I think it was a Gartner study that said like up to 30% of all office work tasks have, the risk of, I don't even know if risk is the right way to put it, but the risk of being automated away to AI. But I mean, just in my own anecdotal experience, I used to have to type out transcripts for podcast episodes, for videos, and that took hours to do, and now I can do it in minutes. And it frees up, and that's it, just, one simple use case of like the podcasting process where, AI and ChatGPT and tools like that have really helped streamline the mundane parts of that, so I can have, more conversations like this, like with you, and breaking down, these complex topics. And so I'm a fan of it. I recognize, some of the dangers around it, but I think I more see it as like a glass half full, because it does help me with this, a lot of those mundane tasks, and I can spend the rest of that time doing cool stuff and talking to, to cool people. So works out for me. But I know that there's definitely, especially with some of the truck drivers I talk to, they've already been facing it, with ELD and a lot of the monitoring that goes on within the truck. And I could see some of those use cases coming to the white collar jobs too, but I think it's going to come to the white collar jobs a lot faster than it will for
Oh
some of
yeah.
these blue collar jobs. All right, so last question that I have for you before we get into, a couple rapid fire questions that I wanted to chat with you about. But with Nimble specifically, you guys just raised a Series B round of funding for $65 million. You added Boston Dynamics founder to your board of directors. So we've talked about a lot of cool things in this interview. So with all of that recent news, what's next for Nimble?
Yeah, turning up all things Nimble right now. A lot of things going our way. It's been a good life choice for me to be over here at a right time where we're really hitting stride, and adding to that, it's a total $115 million raised across the A and B rounds to do very meaningful work. And so for us, it's continue to put more pins on the map, as we like to say, get more fulfillment centers out, get even outside of the U.S. So we have aspirations to go into, Mexico is probably going to be our next market outside of the U.S. to be able to open the door for some of the cross-border things that are happening to avoid duties and taxes, but still provide automation in what we're doing there. Even though most people don't think to bring automation to Mexico, we still see value in it. So I think it's that we've got to continue to scale and acquire new customers, and so it's programs like this that will help us do that. And as we do that, we will continue to put more things. And then within there, it's that also the R&D framework that we talked about of automating the pack side of the business, then automating the dock door side of unload and load and parcel sortation. And then there's even some things where we can see taking our systems, our solutions, and actually putting them on the road and applying them to trucks to have loading and unloading of vehicles, and different delivery things. So there's a whole roadmap is long in terms of what we're going to do, and we just unfortunately have to take them one step at a time to because of the capital, because of the revenue that we generate, we have to balance those things. But in the very near future, we will see many of these second and third steps be coming to fruition.
Well, I think you guys have a really cool approach as far as, allowing businesses to be able to do a test run and not having to worry about I guess the capital intensive nature of having to retrofit an old warehouse. You just start fresh, start it with a blank slate, and sometimes that's the best route to take. Now, couple rapid fire questions for you. This is something new that we are debuting, starting in July. I just kind of want to get like a pulse of what the industry, industry thought leaders in supply chain and logistics are thinking about. So these kind of don't have anything to do with Nimble, but just your own personal experience. So the first question is, what's your favorite social media platform and why? It can be inside or outside of the industry.
I'm LinkedIn. I'm a one trick pony. I am all things LinkedIn, good, bad, or indifferent. So it's been very valuable for me for my career, whether it be finding jobs, whether it be for sales, whether it be for networking. It's helped me create a skill of networking that has been life changing for me. So I'm all about LinkedIn. Probably I should get into other platforms. It's hard to pivot and find something that creates as much value for me as they do.
I was so surprised at like other people who are on social media platforms. Instagram is probably the big one that I get made fun of for saying you should take your talents to LinkedIn, because that's where people, with the organic reach is on LinkedIn, and you can
Yeah.
actually get, some ROI versus, Instagram. But that's I guess a topic for another day. Next rapid fire question. What is your favorite supply chain factoid?
Ooh, that's a stumper.
Could
I
be
think I'll leave
e-commerce.
it. What's that?
I said it could be e-commerce related.
So I think I'll leave it to something we've done. It's a factoid of Nimble, but I think it's applicable where we've shrunk down our buildings by 82% to get the same throughput
Hmm.
by getting rid of racking and aisles. So that's been a mind blowing number that still I scratch my head and think about of how much waste there is in a building by using the cubic footage of a building versus just the square footage of a building,
Huh.
and so that's probably something that is really interesting but unique to us.
And you're talking, I guess, the floor to the ceiling, using that space instead of just the spread out space.
We work from ground to 30 feet high in all
Hmm.
of our buildings and have zero racks and zero aisles. So, for example, in a typical warehouse that you would see with an aisle, I can put about 200,000 to 400,000 units of storage units in an area that they need to just walk up and down to push a cart or have a machine go through, and multiply that times 10, 20, 30, 40, however many aisles they have. That's a lot of units that we can take advantage of. So, so like you'll see this as you watch all your feeds in LinkedIn. And watch how many warehouse operators are showing a picture behind them, and the racking's like at their head, and then there's like 30 feet above them, and just think how unproductive is that warehouse that's a million square feet, but it's got 70% of the cubing is not being utilized. And so we've been able to take advantage of all of that, because the average warehouse now is 36 feet high, and
Hmm.
they go over 40 feet high in the new construction. So if you're not working vertically, you're really overpaying for all the other aspects of your building.
Oh, that's super interesting. I would have thought that a warehouse operator would see that almost, I guess, real estate part of their warehouse and recognize we probably need to do something with this. Why are the roofs so tall on a warehouse? Is it just that's
Because
just
they
what
want
they've
that
always
that
done?
storage component to put skids up on there, and put racking. So there is part of it is being used, but when they get into like their pick side, that's usually we're limited to like 6-7 feet of reach,
Hmm.
and then steel got really expensive. So adding mezzanines or other types of platforms is counterproductive. So now people are just working inefficiently as a result of it.
Huh. That's super interesting. Good one. Good job. All right, last one. Favorite SaaS product or tool? Can't be Nimble.
I will skip out here, and I'm all about AI note takers now. And
Yeah.
my go-to is Pattern AI. You cannot take that away from me. That attends meetings religiously for me, whether I'm there or not. It's always there, and it does all the things you just talked about: the transcribing, the summaries, the let's just go back and see things and catch things, and then send it to everybody that was on the call, and nobody has to. I mean, how many hours have you spent a week just typing and typing? And how much did you miss in those meetings because you're head down trying to capture what did the customer just say that was so juicy of a nugget? And then meanwhile, you missed a great opportunity to go into some other question or some other problem that you're trying to solve for them. And now we can sit back with our eyes open and our ears open and our hands on our laps or on our desk and just enjoy conversation, and we don't skip a beat because we've got AI note takers there the whole ride for us.
That's super interesting. I haven't heard of that one before. I use Otter.ai and it does a lot of the same things that you just talked about. Some people like freak out when it joins a meeting, but I'm like, don't worry, it's going to send you a copy afterwards.
Yep.
And then once they see it, it's like $100 a year, but it takes care of everything and it sends
Yes.
everybody a copy of it afterwards. I got to check out pattern.ai because I've used even some podcast transcription tools and none of them are as good as otter.ai. So they don't pay me to say that, but I feel like they should because I feel like I
Yeah,
mentioned it
check
on
out
every
Pattern. I
single
don't think
episode.
they're .ai. I think if you do that, you're going to find somebody that cuts material.
Oh,
Um, but just type like Pattern AI note taking or something like that, and it'll get, because I forget their actual domain. Shame on me, but
oh,
um,
get pattern.ai. Just
that's it. There we go. I knew it
live
was
market
something
research
slightly
right here.
different. Yeah, but
well,
you'll
well,
be hooked. I mean, but you sounds like you've got it solved. But in general, AI note takers. So I use AI just like everybody else does in my day to day life, and it is a life changer for us.
are you guys using, ChatGPT, Bard? Do you have, I guess, a large language model of choice?
We do. So I also, we are an AI company, so we get to do some. Interestingly enough, we've created our version of that for RFP responses.
Oh, cool.
So I'm sure you've lived this being in sales before, where you get asked 1,000 questions. They're almost all the same question, but slightly different. And so we've written a tool to automate as much of that as we possibly can. And it's the same kind of construct as a chat GPT, and goes through there, and we dump the questions and the answers, and it outputs. So we're pretty excited about that.
Oh, that's super cool because then that cuts down on a lot of the I guess the tire kickers who, they just want the information. They're not exactly ready to make a purchase yet. But meetings, we just talked about meetings take up so much time. And I think I read a
That
stat the other day. It's like 35% of meetings are waste. I don't know where that
yes.
stat came from, but it came from an email. So
It's a true thing because we got rid of meetings. We were at the beginning of the year kind of following Shopify. We anything that was three or more, we were asked to get rid of and see how long we could go without. None have been added back on my schedule that we've eliminated.
wow.
We've gotten very now we use Slack and we do communications. We also create like a PowerPoint that we update live out of Salesforce as an example. So a lot of our like tell the business about what's going on with the business type stuff. We just auto populate this deck and then we meet on it on a like more like biweekly basis instead of a weekly basis. So things of that nature. So I wholeheartedly hear that and understand that and believe that because we've gotten rid of, we did this whole exercise. I was shocked. We were averaging like 7 hours a week
Wow.
of meetings that we figured we could solve through Slack or through, automation of some sort. And we did. And we've been, 4 or 5 months still going without it. So we now it's like to get a meeting set up in the business. It's like, are you sure you have like you have to get like sign offs almost. So I was talking about like, not like, this is where our like systems come into play is like you have to get like sign off to get the meeting. Like that's where we get rigid.
I
So
love that approach. I wish I
yeah,
could do that as as a business owner when somebody is scheduling meetings for me and they're not exactly a good fit to purchase a product from me, but I still want to hear them out. But the meeting's already booked, so it's kind of awkward to like cancel it at the last minute. So I
well, I
love that
appreciate you not
approach.
canceling us getting on today because so thank
I
you.
Well, we were, this happened, off camera, but my camera did not work. It was I was facing my own sort of robotic issues myself, had to self-diagnosis, but wouldn't you know, shutting it off and turning it back on again, that did the trick. Not the
Sometimes you
panicking
just have to
trying
the power button, right? Pull the plug, make sure it's plugged in. That's like the most commonly asked question in IT, right? It's like, is it plugged in? Yeah, it's
throw it in
plugged in.
rice, like, or
Yeah.
just don't throw it out of window because I was very close to that. But Jonathan, I appreciate your time today. This was a really fascinating discussion. Where can folks follow you, follow more of your work, follow Nimble, all that good stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Our website's simple and easy, nimble.ai. Encourage you to go see that. I'm active on LinkedIn, so feel free. There's not too many Jonathan Briggs out there, but if you type in Jonathan Briggs and Nimble, I'm pretty sure you'll get to me. And love to connect, love to network, love to talk supply chain, anything and everything. So hopefully I can expand the network as a result.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, I'll be sure to link to all of those things in the show notes just to make it easy for folks. But again, thank you. Cool conversation.
Yeah, same here, Blythe. I appreciate it.